You have lived too long with the weight of carrying everyone else's expectations while your own heart grows smaller in the dark. Tonight, the moon offers you something different. Tonight, you can finally put down what was never yours to carry. The evening air holds a strange gentleness as you find yourself walking down a path you don't remember choosing. Your feet know the way, even though your mind questions every step. There's something about this particular darkness that feels different from all the other nights you've spent running from yourself. You've been taught to hide your sadness behind productivity, to mask your longing with busy schedules and social media scrolling. But here, in this space between day and tomorrow, none of those distractions work anymore. The silence is too thick, too honest. It strips away the costumes you wear for others and leaves you standing bare before the mirror of your own soul. The path beneath your feet changes from concrete to something softer, moss perhaps, or the kind of earth that remembers every footstep ever taken upon it. You realize you're no longer in the familiar territory of your daily life. This is somewhere else entirely, somewhere your rational mind has never been invited. Every night, your dreams try to tell you what daylight refuses to hear. They speak in symbols and sensations, in the language your deepest self has been using since childhood. But you've learned to dismiss them as nonsense, random firings of a tired brain. What if they were actually love letters from the parts of you that never stop believing in magic? The darkness here isn't the harsh black of sleepless nights spent worrying about tomorrow. It's softer, like being held in the palm of something vast and knowing. You begin to understand that you haven't stumbled into this place by accident. You were invited. By whom, you're not sure yet. But the invitation was written in your restlessness, signed with your secret tears. You pass beneath trees that seem older than memory, their branches creating a canopy that filters moonlight into silver threads. Each beam illuminates something different, a flower growing through concrete, a bird's nest woven with scraps of bright fabric, small resurrections happening everywhere. If you know how to look, the parts of you you're ashamed of are walking beside you now, no longer hiding in the shadows of your peripheral vision. The angry part that you've been apologizing for since you were 7. The needy part that learned to make itself small to avoid being too much. The dreaming part that you buried under practical concerns and adult responsibilities. They're not their monsters. These exiled pieces of your soul. They're refugees from a war you started against yourself without realizing it. They've been waiting in the wilderness of your unconscious, keeping small fires burning, hoping you'd eventually remember the way home to your own wholeness. You notice your breathing has changed, deeper now, as if your lungs are remembering how to fully expand. The tight knot in your chest that you've carried for so long, it feels like part of your anatomy begins to loosen, not dissolving entirely, but softening enough that you can feel your heart beating underneath it. A memory surfaces without your permission. You're 8 years old, lying in grass that seemed as vast as an ocean, watching clouds reshape themselves across an endless sky. You felt connected to everything then. The earth beneath your back, the wind in the leaves, the vast mystery of being alive. When did you lose that feeling? When did the world become something to endure rather than something to celebrate? The path curves ahead, leading toward a soft glow that might be firelight or might be something else entirely. You're not afraid, which surprises you. Fear has been your constant companion for so long that its absence feels strange, like wearing clothes that actually fit after years of things being too tight or too loose. You realize you're crying, but these aren't the tears you're used to. Not the frustrated tears of overwhelm or the bitter tears of disappointment. These are different. They feel like rain after a long drought, like your soul finally getting permission to water the seeds it's been keeping in storage. The glow ahead reveals itself to be a small clearing where a fire burns in a circle of stones. Beside it sits a figure you can't quite make out in the flickering light. Not threatening, not welcoming exactly, but present in the way mountains are present, solid and patient and somehow outside of time. You approach slowly, your feet making no sound on the soft earth. The figure doesn't look up as you settle onto a fallen log across the fire from them. The flames dance between you, creating moving shadows that tell stories older than words. The fire speaks in its ancient language of crackle and hiss, reminding you of campfires from childhood when the world still held magic in every shadow. You watch the flames leap and fall, each flicker a tiny dance of transformation. Wood becoming light, light becoming warmth, warmth becoming the kind of comfort you'd forgotten existed. You've been carrying something that doesn't belong to you, the figure says, without lifting their head. Their voice is neither male nor female, neither young nor old. It's the voice of deep waters, of stones worn smooth by centuries of rain. You want to ask what they mean, but your throat won't make the words. Instead, you find yourself nodding. Yes, you have been carrying something, many somethings. The expectations of parents who loved you but couldn't see you. The disappointments of lovers who wanted you to be someone else. The weight of a world that taught you to be afraid of your own desires. Show me, the figure says, and somehow you understand what they're asking. You reach into your chest as if were made of water, and your hands find the heavy stones you've been carrying there. One by one, you pull them out and place them on the ground between you and the fire. Each stone has a name: shame, unworthiness, the fear of being too much, the fear of being not enough, the exhaustion of trying to earn love by erasing yourself. The first stone is smooth and black, worn by years of handling. It's the one labeled not good enough that you picked up when you were 5, and your father looked right through you when you showed him your drawing. You remember how it felt to swallow that stone, how it settled heavy in your chest and stayed there. The second stone is jagged and sharp, more recent. Too sensitive, it whispers. You collected this one in high school when your friends rolled their eyes at your tears during a movie. You learned to make yourself smaller after that, to cut off the parts of you that felt too deeply. Stone after stone emerges from your chest, selfish from the time you said no to helping when you were already drowning, broken from the therapist who treated you like a problem to be solved rather than a human being worthy of compassion, unlovable from every relationship that ended with someone deciding you were too complicated, too much work. With each stone you remove, your breathing becomes easier. The fire seems to burn brighter, as if fed by your willingness to let go. The figure watches without judgment, their presence steady, as you unburden yourself of weights you didn't even realize you'd been carrying. When the last stone is placed on the earth, you feel hollow, but not empty. Hollow like a flute that can finally make music. Hollow like a bell that can finally ring true. The space in your chest where the stones lived now pulses with something different. Not the heavy weight of accumulated shame, but the light weight of possibility. These were never yours, the figure says, gesturing to the pile of stones. You collected them along the way, thinking they would protect you, but they've only made you heavy. You stare at the stones in the firelight. Some are smooth and dark, worn by years of handling. Others are sharp and angular, more recent additions to your collection. All of them familiar, all of them burdensome, all of them lying about who you really are. But if I don't carry them, you whisper, how will I know how to be good? The figures. Silence stretches between you like a bridge. You're not sure you're ready to cross. The fire pops, sending sparks up into the star-scattered darkness. Each spark rises for a moment, glowing bright, then disappears into the vast night sky. What happens now? You finally ask, finding your voice at last. The figure finally looks up, and you see their face is a mirror that reflects not your appearance, but your essence. The part of you that existed before you learned to hide. The part that will remain when all the stories you tell about yourself fall away. In that reflection, you see a child with eyes full of wonder, a teenager with poems burning in their chest, a young adult who believed they could change the world with the force of their caring. Now you remember, they say simply. The fire crackles and shifts, and in its light you begin to see not just the clearing, but the vast landscape that surrounds it. Rolling hills covered in silver grass that moves like water in the moonlight. A river that winds through the darkness like a ribbon of stars, its surface reflecting more light than the sky contains. Trees that pulse with their own inner radiance, as if lit from within by some ancient understanding. This isn't a place you found. This is a place you've always carried within you, waiting for you to stop running long enough to notice it. The geography of your own soul, mapped in symbols and sensations too deep for ordinary words. You understand now that every moment of your life has been leading to this clearing, this fire, this conversation with the part of yourself that never believed the lies the world told about who you should be, the wise part that has been waiting patiently for you to remember that you are not broken. You were never broken. The figure reaches into the fire without being burned and pulls out a handful of light. They offer it to you, and when you accept it, the light flows into your chest where the stones used to be. It's warm and alive and completely without weight. This is what you were designed to carry, not the heavy expectations of others, but the light of your own authentic being. The light settles into your bones like warmth settling into a house that's been cold too long. You feel yourself changing as it spreads through your body, but not becoming someone new. Instead, you're remembering who you were before the world taught you to be afraid of your own radiance, before you learned that love was something you had to earn through perfection. The child who knew that every sunset was painted specifically for their eyes. The teenager who felt poems stirring in their chest like birds learning to fly. The young adult who believed they could change the world with the force of their caring. They're all still here, these earlier versions of yourself. They've been waiting in this clearing for you to find your way back to them. You realize that every wrong turn led you deeper into yourself. Every mistake taught you something about what you're not. Every moment of pain carved out more space for joy. Every night you spent feeling lost was actually a night you spent wandering closer to home. The figure stands and walks to the edge of the clearing, their form beginning to fade into the darkness between the trees. But before they disappear entirely, they turn back to you. The fire will always be here, they say, and so will you. The real you, the one who knows that love is not something you earn, but something you are. You're alone now with the flames and the pile of stones and the light glowing warm in your chest. But you don't feel lonely. You feel complete in a way you'd forgotten was possible. Complete and connected to everything. The earth beneath you, the stars above, the vast mystery of existence that includes your own small but significant story. You begin to understand why you had to carry those stones for so long. Not because you deserved the weight, but because only by carrying them could you learn to distinguish between what belongs to you and what doesn't. Only by feeling the heaviness could you appreciate the lightness that is your birthright. The stones on the ground begin to change as you watch. Some crumble into dust that the wind carries away, scattering your old limitations to the four directions. Others transform into seeds that sink into the earth, becoming something new. Even your suffering, you realize, can become compost for growth if you're willing to let it decompose instead of carrying it forever. A sound draws your attention and you turn to see a small stream flowing through the clearing that wasn't there before. Or perhaps it was always there and you just couldn't see it until now. The water catches the firelight and throws it back in patterns that remind you of laughter. Stay by the fire for a long time, watching the flames dance and listening to the night sounds that surround the clearing. Somewhere an owl calls to its mate, the sound echoing through the darkness like a prayer being answered. Water moves over stones in the nearby stream, creating a rhythm that matches your heartbeat. The earth itself seems to be breathing, inhaling starlight and exhaling peace. A new memory surfaces, this one not from your childhood, but from your future. You see yourself walking through your ordinary life, but changed. Still human, still imperfect, but no longer carrying the weight of everyone else's definitions of who you should be. You see yourself saying no without apologizing, saying yes without fear, speaking your truth, or without needing anyone else's permission. You see yourself loving without conditions, starting with yourself. You see yourself creating without worrying about whether it's good enough, because you understand now that the act of creation itself is what matters. You see yourself belonging to yourself so completely that you can finally belong to others without losing who you are. This future version of yourself sits across from you in the firelight, as real as the stones you've released. They smile with a peace you've never seen in any mirror, and you understand that this is not someone you need to become, but someone you already are, waiting to be uncovered. When you finally stand to leave, you find that the path has changed. Or perhaps you have changed, and so you see different possibilities than before. There are many paths now, leading in all directions, each one glowing faintly with its own invitation. One leads toward mountains that pierce the sky like prayers made stone. Another winds through valleys where flowers grow in colors that don't exist in the ordinary world. You choose the one that calls to your heart rather than your head, the one that winds toward the river of stars you glimpsed earlier. As you walk, you carry nothing but the light in your chest and a profound understanding that you are exactly where you need to be, exactly who you need to be, exactly as loved as you need to be. The clearing falls behind you, but you know it will always be there when you need to remember. The fire will always be burning. The figure will always be waiting. And the pile of stones will always remind you of what you've learned to set down. You walk through the night with steps that make no sound, but leave traces of light on the path behind you. For others who might be wandering in the darkness, looking for their own way home to themselves, your journey becomes a gift to theirs, just as every journey before yours became a gift to you. The path leads you through landscapes that shift and change like dreams given form. Sometimes you're walking through forests where every tree trunk holds ancient wisdom carved in its bark. The stories of everyone who ever found shelter beneath these branches, everyone who ever looked up through these leaves and remembered that they were part of something larger than their individual pain. The trees whisper to each other in a language older than words, sharing news of growth and seasons, of the eternal cycle of death and rebirth that governs all living things. You understand that you are part of this cycle, that your own seasons of darkness were preparation for this blooming, this remembering, this coming into the light of your own being. Sometimes the path leads across meadows where flowers grow in patterns that spell out messages in a language older than words. Messages of welcome, of belonging, of the simple truth that you have always been enough, exactly as you are. The flowers release fragrances that trigger memories you didn't know you had. The smell of your grandmother's garden, the sweetness of summer evenings, when time moved like honey, and everything seemed possible. You kneel among the flowers and pick one to carry with you. A small white bloom that seems to hold moonlight in its petals. As you tuck it behind your ear, you remember being a child and believing that flowers were the earth's way of smiling. How long has it been since you've seen the world as friendly rather than hostile? How long since you felt held by life rather than buffeted by it? Sometimes the path leads along cliffs that overlook oceans of possibility, stretching to horizons that exist only in the realm of the heart. The waves below crash against rocks worn smooth by eons of patient surrender, creating music that sounds like the breathing of some vast, benevolent creature. You stand at the edge and feel the salt spray on your face, tasting tears that are not your own, but belong to everyone who has ever stood at the edge of themselves and wondered if they were brave enough to jump. The ocean calls to something ancient in your bones, reminding you that you came from water, that your very cells remember the rhythm of tides, the dance of salt and moon. The wind carries voices of those who have stood here before you, some crying out despair, others whooping with joy, all of them human, all of them trying to make sense of the beautiful, terrible mystery of being alive. You add your own voice to theirs, not in words, but in a sound that comes from deeper than your throat. a sound of recognition, of homecoming, of finally understanding that you belong to this great community of beings who have all struggled with the question of whether they matter. Each step takes you deeper into the country of yourself, the unexplored territories where your dreams have been living in exile, tending small gardens of hope in secret places, the fertile fields where your creativity has been waiting for permission to grow wild, to spread beyond the careful boundaries you've tried to impose on it. You discover hidden gardens where your joy has been living all along, keeping itself alive through the longest winters of your discontent. Flowers of laughter that bloom even in darkness. Trees of delight that fruit even when no one is watching. Springs of wonder that have never stopped flowing, even when you forgot how to see them. In one such garden, you find a child sitting by a pond, trailing their fingers in water that reflects clouds and dreams in equal measure. The child looks up as you approach, and you see your own face, but younger, unmarked by the accumulated disappointments that taught you to expect less from life. "I've been waiting for you," the child says simply. You sit beside them on the soft grass, watching the fish that swim in the pond like living jewels. "I'm sorry I took so long," you say, though you're not sure exactly what you're apologizing for. "You came when you were ready," the child replies. That's all that matters. You realize this child has been the voice whispering in your dreams, the part of you that never stopped believing in magic, never stopped trusting that life could be beautiful if you just remembered how to see it properly. This child has been feeding the spark of hope that kept you going through the darkest nights, even when you didn't know where the hope was coming from. "What do you want me to remember?" you ask. The child smiles and points to the reflection in the pond. But instead of seeing your faces, you see the world as it really is, stripped of all the stories about scarcity and competition and the need to prove your worth. You see a world that runs on love, where every being is connected to every other, being in an intricate web of care and mutual support. "Remember that you belong here," the child says. "Remember that your sensitivity is not a weakness, but a gift. Remember that your dreams are not distractions, but directions. Remember that love is not something you have to earn, but something you are." You lean down and hug this child version of yourself, feeling the warmth of their small body, the trust in their embrace. As you hold them, you feel years of self-criticism melting away, replaced by the kind of gentle acceptance you would naturally give to any child in need of comfort. When you release the embrace, the child takes your hand and leads you to another part of the garden where a teenager sits writing in a journal, their face intense with the effort of trying to capture in words the feelings that seem too big for any human body to contain. This teenager looks up as you approach, and you see the fire in their eyes that you learn to bank down, the passion you learn to moderate, the intensity you were taught to apologize for. They've been waiting here too, holding space for all the feelings you decided were too much for the world to handle. Wrote you letters, the teenager says, holding up the journal. Every day, I kept writing even when you stopped listening. You take the journal with trembling hands and flip through pages covered with your own handwriting, but younger, more urgent, poems about injustice and beauty and the terrible, wonderful weight of caring so much about everything. Dreams of the person you might become if you could just stay brave enough to keep growing toward your own light. Letters to your future self, asking you not to forget the vow they'd made to never become the kind of adult who stopped believing in the possibility of a better world. Plans for all the ways they would change things, create things, love things into being that had never existed before. I'm sorry I forgot, you whisper, feeling the truth of those words in your bones. You didn't forget, the teenager says gently. You just got scared. But look, you found your way back. That's what matters. They stand and embrace you, and you feel their fierce hope flowing into your chest, mixing with the light you received by the fire. The hope that had been waiting all these years for you to be strong enough to carry it again. Further into the garden, you find other versions of yourself. The young adult who believed they could save the world through the sheer force of their caring, before they learned that the world is more complicated than their idealism could hold. The new graduate full of dreams and terror in equal measure, standing at the threshold of a life they couldn't yet imagine. Each version of yourself has something to offer, some piece of your original wholeness that got lost along the way. Your natural curiosity before you learned that questions could be dangerous. Your generous heart before you learned that giving could be weaponized against you. Your wild creativity before you learned that art had to be practical to have value. You gather these lost pieces like flowers, feeling yourself becoming more complete with each reunion. Not perfect but whole, not without pain, but no longer defined by it. Not fearless, but no longer paralyzed by fear. As you walk deeper into the garden of yourself, the landscape begins to change again. The paths become wider, more welcoming. The trees grow taller and more magnificent. The air itself seems to shimmer with possibility. You realize that this journey has no end because there is no end to the mystery of who you are. Every moment offers new territories to explore, new aspects of your being to welcome home. The path continues forever, not because you're lost, but because you're infinite. A figure approaches through the trees, and at first you think it might be the mysterious person from the clearing. But as they draw closer, you see that this is someone else entirely. An older version of yourself, their hair silver with wisdom, their face lined with laughter and tears, and the accumulated beauty of a life fully lived. "Hello, dear one," they say, and their voice carries the warmth of every kind word you've ever longed to hear. Who are you? You ask, though part of you already knows. I am who you become when you stop being afraid of who you are, they reply. I am the future that's waiting for you when you remember how to trust your own goodness. This future self radiates a peace you've never seen in any mirror, a contentment that comes not from having achieved everything they wanted, but from having learned to love themselves exactly as they are. They have the soft power of someone who has made friends with all the parts of themselves, even the difficult ones. What's it like, you ask, being whole? They smile, and in that smile you see every sunrise you've ever loved, every moment, connection you've ever felt, every time you've glimpsed the sacred hiding in the ordinary. It's like coming home to a house you never knew you owned, they say. It's like finding out you've been rich all along, but didn't know how to access your wealth. It's like discovering that the love you've been seeking everywhere else has been living in your chest all along, waiting for you to turn your attention inward. They reach out and touch your face with hands that feel familiar, and in their touch you feel the accumulation of every kindness you've ever shown yourself, every moment of self-compassion, every time you chose to be gentle with your own heart instead of harsh. The journey you're on, they continue, it never really ends. But it gets easier. You learn to trust the process. You learn that every detour is actually part of the path. You learn that you can't do this wrong. But what about all the mistakes I've made, you ask? All the time I've wasted? There are no mistakes, they say gently. Only experiences, only learning, only the long, beautiful process of becoming fully yourself. Every stumble taught you something about your own resilience. Every wrong turn led you to discoveries you wouldn't have made otherwise. Every moment of pain carved out more space in your heart for joy. You feel tears streaming down your face, but these are different from any tears you've cried before. These are tears of relief, of recognition, of finally understanding that you don't have to be perfect to be worthy of love. You don't have to have it all figured out to belong here. You don't have to earn your place in the world by being anything other than exactly who you are. How do I remember this when I go back, you ask? How do I hold onto this feeling in the ordinary world? You carry it in your body, they say, in your breath, in your heartbeat, in the way you move through space. You practice being gentle with yourself until gentleness becomes your default. You practice telling yourself the truth until truth becomes your native language. You practice loving yourself until love becomes the lens through which you see everything. They embrace you then, and in their arms you feel held by every version of yourself that has ever existed or ever will exist. The child who believed in magic, the teenager who felt everything so deeply, the young adult who wanted to save the world, the person you are now, learning to save yourself, the elder you will become wise with the accumulated understanding of a life fully lived. As dawn begins to touch the edges of the sky, painting everything in shades of rose and gold, you understand that you're returning to the ordinary world transformed. Not because anything external has changed, but because you've remembered the secret the night was trying to teach you all along. You are not broken. You were never broken. You are a mystery exploring itself through the experience of being human. Every feeling you've ever felt, every mistake you've ever made, every moment of suffering, and every moment of joy has been part of a vast and beautiful becoming that continues with each breath you take. The sunrise finds you standing at the edge of your regular life, but you're no longer the same person who began this journey. You carry the clearing within you now. The fire burns in your chest. The river flows in your veins. The stars reflect in your eyes. The garden of yourself blooms eternal in your heart. You remember everything now, not just the night's journey, but the deeper truths it revealed. You remember that love is not something you have to earn through perfection. You remember that your sensitivity is not a weakness, but a superpower that allows you to experience the full spectrum of human emotion. You remember that your dreams are not distractions, but directions pointing you toward your most authentic life. Most importantly, you remember that the journey inward is not selfish but essential. The more fully you inhabit your own authentic being, the more you have to offer the world. Your healing becomes part of the collective healing. Your return to wholeness creates permission for others to do the same. The ordinary world looks different now through eyes that have remembered how to see magic. The concrete sidewalks pulse with life, each crack a small rebellion of nature against human attempts to control and contain. The familiar buildings stand like monuments to human creativity and cooperation, each one representing countless acts of imagination and collaboration. Even the morning traffic moves with a kind of rhythm, each person carrying their own mysteries, their own invitations to adventure, their own stories of loss and longing, and the eternal hope for something better. You see in each face the same journey you've just completed, the same search for home, the same need to remember that they are loved exactly as they are. You walk back into your life, carrying the night's gifts, the lightness where the stones used to be, the fire that burns steady in your chest, the knowing that you are held by something vast and loving, even when you can't feel it. The understanding that you belong here simply by being here. Your phone buzzes with messages from people who have no idea where you've been, what you've seen, how you've changed. But you see their messages differently now, not as demands on your energy, but as invitations to connection, not as interruptions to your peace, but as opportunities to practice loving with your whole heart. You respond to each message from this new place of wholeness, and even though your words are ordinary, they carry something different, a warmth that wasn't there before, a presence that comes from someone who has made peace with themselves, a love that flows not from emptiness seeking to be filled, but from fullness seeking to overflow. This is not the end of the story, but the beginning of a new chapter. One written not from fear, but from curiosity, not from the need to prove your worth, but from the joy of expressing your truth, not from the old belief that you must earn your place in the world, but from the remembered understanding that you belong here simply by being. The sun rises fully now, washing the world in light that seems to come not just from the sky, but from within every living thing, including you, especially you. The light you thought you'd lost was never gone. It was just waiting for you to stop looking for it outside yourself and remember that you've been carrying it all along. Throughout the day, you notice small miracles that were always there, but that you couldn't see before. The way sunlight streams through windows like liquid gold. The sound of children laughing in a distant playground, their joy pure and uncomplicated. The smile of a stranger on the street who seems to recognize something familiar in your eyes. You find yourself responding to challenges differently. When someone is rude to you, instead of taking it personally, you see their pain and respond with compassion. When you make a mistake, instead of drowning in self-criticism, you treat yourself with the same kindness you would show a good friend. When fear arises, instead of pushing it away, you welcome it as information about what matters to you. There is a famous saying by someone who understood the journey you have taken. Until you make the unconscious conscious, said Carl Jung, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. But now you understand that consciousness is not a destination, but a practice. Every day offers new opportunities to choose awareness over automaticity, love over fear, truth over the stories that keep you small. You begin to see that your whole life has been a preparation for this moment of awakening. Every relationship that challenged you to grow, every job that pushed you beyond your comfort zone, every loss that broke your heart open wider, every moment of joy that reminded you what you're living for, all of it has been guiding you toward this homecoming to yourself. The changes are subtle at first. You find yourself pausing before reacting, taking a breath to check in with your authentic response rather than your conditioned one. You start saying no to things that drain your energy and yes to things that light you up. You begin trusting your intuition as much as your rational mind. Your creativity awakens from its long slumber. Ideas that have been waiting patiently in the wings of your consciousness begin to step into the spotlight. You write the first line of the poem that's been trying to be born through you for years. You take the dance class you've been putting off. You have the conversation you've been avoiding because it might change everything. People notice something different about you, though they can't quite put their finger on what it is. Your presence feels more solid, more authentic. Your laughter comes easier. Your tears, when they come, feel cleaner somehow, like rain washing the world fresh rather than storms threatening to destroy everything in their path. You start to see your past differently too, not as a series of failures and missed opportunities, but as a perfectly orchestrated curriculum designed to teach you exactly what you needed to learn to become who you are now. Every heartbreak that taught you about your own resilience, every rejection that forced you to rely on your own approval, every moment of doubt that eventually led you to trust yourself more deeply. Even your struggles begin to make sense in a new way. The depression that forced you to slow down and look inward, the anxiety that taught you to pay attention to your body's wisdom, the addiction that showed you the difference between what numbs pain and what actually heals it. All of it has been in service of this awakening, this remembering, this coming home to yourself. You understand now that healing is not about becoming someone new, but about remembering who you were before the world taught you to be afraid of your own light. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you abandoned in order to fit in, to be safe, to be loved. It's about integrating all the fragments of your experience into a coherent whole. The work is ongoing. Some days you feel solidly rooted in this new understanding, and other days you catch yourself slipping back into old patterns of self-doubt and self-criticism. But now you have the tools to find your way back. You know where the clearing is. You know how to light the fire. You know how to put down the stones and pick up the light. You develop rituals that help you remember. A morning practice of sitting quietly and listening to your inner voice before the world's demands take over. An evening practice of reviewing the day, not for what you did wrong, but for moments when you acted from love. A weekly practice of doing something that feeds your soul rather than your resume. Your relationships begin to shift as well. You attract people who can see and appreciate your authentic self, and you naturally drift away from those who only wanted you to play a role. You have more honest conversations, set clearer boundaries, and love more freely because you're no longer trying to earn love by being perfect. You stop apologizing for taking up space, for having needs, for being human. You stop shrinking yourself to make others comfortable. You stop performing happiness when you're sad, performing confidence when you're scared, performing okay when you're struggling. You learn that authenticity is not selfish but necessary, not optional but essential. The mysterious figure from the clearing begins to visit you in quiet moments throughout your days. Sometimes In meditation, sometimes in dreams, sometimes in the space between thoughts when you're washing dishes or walking to work. They don't speak much anymore because you've internalized their message, but their presence reminds you that you're not alone in this journey, that you're part of a vast community of beings, all finding their way home to themselves. You start to notice others who are on their own night voyages. The colleague who seems lost behind their professional facade, the neighbor who smiles, but whose eyes look hollow, the stranger on the bus, whose shoulders carry invisible weight. You can't fix them, but you can hold space for their journey. You can be a gentle presence that reminds them they're not alone. Sometimes you share what you've learned, but not in a preachy way. You simply live from this new place of wholeness, and others are drawn to whatever it is they sense in you. They ask what's different, and you tell them about the journey inward, about the clearing and the fire and the stones they don't have to carry anymore. Some are ready to hear it and begin their own night voyages. Others aren't there yet, and that's okay too. You remember that everyone has their own timing, their own path, their own curriculum of awakening. You can't rush someone else's journey any more than you could have rushed your own. You learn to trust the process, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. When you see someone struggling, instead of rushing in to fix or save them, you hold space for their experience. You offer presence without trying to change them. You love them exactly as they are, while trusting that they have everything they need within them to find their own way home. The seasons change, and you notice how differently you experience each one now. Winter no longer feels like something to endure, but like a necessary time of rest and reflection. Spring arrives, not just in the world around you, but in your body, in your heart, in the way you move through your days. Summer brings a warmth that has nothing to do with temperature and everything to do with the fire that now burns steady in your chest. Autumn becomes a teacher, showing you how to let go gracefully, how to release what no longer serves while trusting that what you need will remain. The trees don't mourn their falling leaves, but trust that this letting go makes space for new growth. You learn to approach your own changes with similar grace. Years pass, though time feels different now. Less linear, less urgent. You're no longer racing toward some imagined finish line where you'll finally be good enough, successful enough, happy enough. You understand now that the only moment that exists is this one, and this one, and this one. Each breath and opportunity to choose love over fear, presence over performance, truth over the stories that keep you small. You face new challenges, of course. Life doesn't become perfect just because you've made friends with yourself. You lose people you love. You fail at things that matter to you. You get sick. You make mistakes. You sometimes forget everything you've learned and find yourself back in old patterns of self-doubt and criticism. But now you have a different relationship with difficulty. Instead of seeing challenges as evidence that you're doing something wrong, you understand them as invitations to grow. Instead of being surprised by pain, you expect it as part of the human experience. Instead of fighting against what is, you learn to flow with the current of your life while staying rooted in the truth of who you are. When your mother dies, you grieve fully and completely, allowing the waves of sadness to move through you without resistance. But even in your grief, you feel connected to something larger than your individual loss. You understand that love doesn't die when the body does, that the connection you shared continues in a different form. When you lose a job you thought defined you, you feel the shock and fear and uncertainty. But underneath those surface emotions, you remain anchored in the knowing that your worth doesn't depend on external circumstances. You use the transition as an opportunity to reassess what you really want, to align your work more closely with your values. When a relationship ends that you thought would last forever, you feel the heartbreak and disappointment. But you don't take it as evidence that you're unlovable or destined to be alone. You see it as information about what works for you and what doesn't, about how you want to love and be loved going forward. Each challenge becomes a teacher, showing you new depths of your own resilience, new facets of your compassion, new ways to embody the wisdom you've gained. You discover that wholeness doesn't mean the absence of pain, but the presence of love, even in the midst of difficulty. Your understanding of Carl Jung's teachings deepens as you live them rather than just thinking about them. You experience firsthand what he meant when he wrote about the shadow and how it contains not just our darkness, but also our disowned light. You discover that integrating your shadow means reclaiming not just your anger and sadness, but also your joy and power and wild creativity. You learn about what Jung called individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you really are rather than who others expect you to be. You understand that this isn't selfish, but essential, that the world needs you to be fully yourself in all your unique complexity, rather than a pale imitation of someone else's idea of perfection. The concept of the collective unconscious becomes lived experience as you recognize the universal patterns that connect you to all of humanity. In your struggles and triumphs, you see the same archetypal stories that have been playing out since the beginning of human consciousness. You are both utterly unique and completely universal, both irreplaceable individual and integral part of the whole. Jung's words about making the unconscious conscious take on new meanings as you practice awareness in your daily life. You catch yourself in old patterns more quickly. You notice when you're operating from fear rather than love. You recognize when you're trying to be who you think you should be rather than who you actually are. Dreams become allies in your ongoing journey of self-discovery. Instead of dismissing them as random neural firing, you pay attention to their ayadera, symbols and stories. You keep a journal by your bed and record the images that visit you in sleep. Often, they offer guidance about situations you're facing, showing you options you hadn't considered or revealing fears you didn't know you were carrying. One night, you dream of a garden overgrown with weeds, and you understand it's showing you areas of your life that need attention. Another night, you dream of flying, and you wake up remembering that you have more freedom than you've been allowing yourself to exercise. The dreams become a dialogue between your conscious and unconscious minds, helping you navigate life with greater wisdom and clarity. You begin to see synchronicities everywhere. Meaningful coincidences that Jung wrote about as signs that you're aligned with your authentic path. You think of someone you haven't spoken to in years, and they call that same day. You're struggling with a decision, and a book falls open to exactly the page that contains the insight you need. A stranger mentions something that perfectly addresses a question you've been carrying. These moments feel like winks from the universe, confirmations that you're on the right track. Not because life is giving you everything you want, but because you're paying attention to what life is offering. You're participating in the conversation rather than just talking at it. Your creative expression flourishes as you stop worrying about whether it's good enough and start focusing on whether it's true enough. You write the stories that want to be told through you. You paint the images that arise from your depths. You dance the dances that your body knows, even when your mind doesn't understand them. The art you create isn't necessarily masterful in any conventional sense, but it's authentic in a way that moves people. Friends tell you that your pointings remind them of dreams they'd forgotten. Strangers at poetry readings say your words help them feel less alone. You realize that the purpose of creativity isn't to impress, but to connect, not to prove your talent, but to share your truth. You develop a different relationship with your emotions as well. Instead of trying to be positive all the time, you learn to welcome the full spectrum of human feeling. Anger becomes information about your boundaries. Sadness becomes a doorway to compassion. Fear becomes energy that can be transformed into excitement or action. Stop judging yourself for having difficult emotions and start getting curious about what they're trying to tell you. You learn that you can feel angry without being cruel, sad without being hopeless, afraid without being paralyzed. Emotions become weather patterns, moving through the landscape of your consciousness rather than defining features of your identity. The practice of presence becomes central to your daily life, not the spiritual bypassing kind of presence that tries to avoid difficulty, but the full-bodied presence that can hold whatever arises with love and awareness. You learn to be present with your joy without grasping at it, present with your pain without being overwhelmed by it. This presence transforms your relationships in profound ways. When your partner is upset, instead of immediately trying to fix their feelings or defend yourself, you learn to simply be with them in their experience. When your child is having a tantrum, instead of reacting from your own triggered state, you breathe and respond from a place of calm understanding. You discover that presence is the greatest gift you can offer anyone. Not advice, not solutions, not attempts to make everything better, but the simple offering of your full attention and unconditional acceptance. This kind of presence heals without trying to heal, loves without conditions, serves without agenda. Your understanding of love itself evolves as you practice loving yourself unconditionally. You realize that real love isn't the desperate need to be completed by another person, but the overflow of your own wholeness. It's not the attempt to get something from someone else, but the natural expression of what you already are. This changes how you approach romantic relationships. Instead of seeking someone to fill your empty spaces, you look for someone to share your fullness with. Instead of trying to be what you think they want, you show up as who you actually are and trust that the right person will love what they find. When conflicts arise, instead of fighting to be right, you fight for connection. You speak your truths without attacking theirs. You listen not to formulate your rebuttal, but to understand their experience. You take responsibility for your part without taking on responsibility for everything. Friendships deepen as you stop performing and start relating. You share your struggles as well. as your successes. You ask for help when you need it. You offer support without trying to rescue. You celebrate others' joy without comparing it to your own. You hold space for their pain without trying to take it away. Family relationships shift as you stop trying to be the person they want you to be and start being the person you actually are. Some family members adjust to this new version of you with grace. Others struggle with the changes, preferring the old version who was easier to control or predict. You learn to love them all while protecting your own energy and boundaries. You realize that you can love someone deeply without agreeing with their choices. You can care about their well-being without taking responsibility for their happiness. You can be loyal to family connections without sacrificing your own authenticity. These distinctions feel revolutionary after years of believing that love meant erasing yourself. Work becomes an expression of your values rather than just a means of survival. You might not change careers dramatically, but you approach whatever work you do with greater consciousness. You look for ways to align your daily tasks with your deeper purpose. You treat colleagues with the same respect and compassion you've learned to show yourself. If your work environment is toxic, you don't just endure it anymore. You either work to change what you can or find the courage to leave. You trust that when you operate from authenticity and integrity, opportunities aligned with those values will appear. Not magically, but through the natural magnetism of someone who knows their worth. Money takes on a different meaning. Well, you stop seeing it as a measure of your value and start seeing it as energy to be circulated in service of what matters to you. You spend more consciously, buy less compulsively, give more generously. You work to earn what you need while remembering that what you truly need is simpler than what you've been told you should want. Your relationship with your body transforms as you stop seeing it as something to control and start experiencing it as something to inhabit. You listen to its needs for rest, movement, nourishment, pleasure. You stop punishing it for not looking like magazine covers and start appreciating it for all the ways it serves you. Exercise becomes play rather than punishment. Eating becomes nourishment rather than moral judgment. Sleep becomes sacred rather than something to skimp on. You treat your body like the faithful friend it's always been, carrying you through every experience of your life without complaint. Aging becomes something to embrace rather than resist. Each line on your face tells a story of laughter or concern or deep thought. Each gray hair is a badge of wisdom earned through lived experience. Each change in your body is evidence of a life fully inhabited rather than merely observed. You stop trying to preserve some idealized younger version of yourself and start celebrating who you're becoming. You understand that beauty isn't about fitting some external standard, but about the radiance that comes from living authentically. People are drawn to something in you that has nothing to do with your appearance and everything to do with your presence. Spirituality evolves from something you think about to something you live. You might or might not belong to a religious community, but your daily life becomes a practice of reverence. You see the sacred in ordinary moments. A conversation with a friend becomes communion. A walk in nature becomes prayer.